Dragi prijatelji, dobroveče. Moje ime je Vladimir Arsenijević. Obraćam vam se u ime udruženja Krokodil i Krokodilovog centra za savremenu književnost. Moja uloga je jednostavna, da najavim večerašnji program. U pitanju je debata koja se zove Koktel kultura, nekadašnji i sadašnji kosmopolitizam Austrije. Ova debata se odvije u okviru jednog šireg programa koji se dešava tokom meseca decembra. U pitanju je program koji realizujemo zajedno sa našim prijateljima iz Austrijskog kulturnog foruma u Beogradu pod nazivom Austrija in Residence. Kroz 4 distinktna programa predstavljamo različite stvari koje se tiču kulture, društveno-političke situacije, čak i kulinarstva ove zemlje. Tako smo imali 5. decembra kao prvi u ovom programu, ovaj program Eat and Talk, gde smo sa piscem Draganom Velikićem razgovarali o austrijskoj književnosti kroz 20. vek i pripremili neke od najinteresantnijih poslastica austrijske kuhinje. Tokom čitavog meseca decembra imamo Eat and Read menu koji može da se naruči u Krokodilovom centru, a takođe i preko Volta i donesi.com. Sada je na redu debata, dakle, koju sam već spomenuo, koju ću reći nešto malo bliže, i kao četvrti i poslednji program 22. decembra ćemo imati predbožićni koncert koji se zove, sad izvinite moj nemački, Weihnachten in der Weissenstadt, Božić u Belom gradu. Koncert se stara Džonin u Krokodilovom centru. Svi ovi programi se zbog objektivne situacije u kojoj živimo odvijaju isključivo online, tako da hvala vam što ste sa nama, to je što ste pred svojim kompjuterima, i siguran sam da ćete uživati i u ovom, a i u narednim programima koje vam pripremamo. Večerašnja debata Koktel kultura, nekadašnji i sadašnji kosmopolitizam Austrije, već samim svojim nazivom na izvestan način upućuje na ono o čemu će se razgovarati. Interesuje nam da sa našim sagovornicima, a u pitanju su Ivan Vejvoda, politikolog iz Beograda koji živi u Beču i radi u Bečkom institutu za humanističke nauke, i Andreas Pitler, istoričar i pisac, zajedno sa moderatorkom Ljubicom Gojgić razgovaraju o, dakle, različitim društvenim dinamikama koje su karakteristične za ovu zemlju. Jednim velikim delom smo bili motivisani i nedavnim tragičnim događajima, tim terorističkim akcijama koje su se događale u Beču i koje su odnele nekoliko ljudskih života. Tako da ja ne bih dalje dužio, prepustio bih reč moderatorki Ljubici Gojgić. Samo bih na kraju rekao da se čitav događaj i razgovor odvijaju na engleskom jeziku. Hvala vam.
Thank you, Vlado, very much. It's really a privilege to be with you tonight and to open this interesting discussion about Austrian cosmopolitism then and now. Hello to Andreas and Ivan. Great to see you again, and I'm looking forward really to hearing your impressions about this topic. Andreas, can we start with you, please? Let us test the very topic of the discussion, and the discussion should deal with cosmopolitism. Is this time? Does this moment that we live in work against the idea of cosmopolitism? It seems that we are stuck, that we have to stay in our countries, in our cities, in our streets, at homes. So does this new concept works against cosmopolitism? Can you just unmute yourself?
Do you hear me now?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, sorry for that. Yeah, you mentioned a point that really highly annoys me at the moment, as you can imagine, because as an author and as an artist, you are not only used to traveling widely, you are in a way also dependent on traveling widely, especially when you have some translations in foreign languages. For instance, my Czech translation was just appearing at the time of the second lockdown, so we couldn't present the edition, the Czech edition, together. And personally, I regret that very much, of course. And I also see a political danger in the whole thing, because I think the European Union should try to cope with this crisis on a real European level. We are all facing the same threat, this pandemic COVID thing, and hence we should try to act together as one against it. And what we see is that every single country is trying to save itself. It's a little bit like the Middle Ages when the plague was there. Every town is closing its doors and hoping that they will not be reached by the plague. In fact, it is a medieval thing to act like that. And I would very, very, very much appreciate if our politicians from all countries in Europe would work together on a solution, because that would mean that we would be allowed to travel freely soon again and could interact more with each other again.
Ivan, you are Belgrade born, now resident of Vienna. What a privilege. If this wasn't 2020, many of our friends from Belgrade would be traveling to Vienna to spend Christmas and New Year holidays there. Vienna is very much loved by the Serbs, by people from the Western Balkans. We feel it near and dear. How does it? What could you say? Maybe let us open this topic, widen it a little bit. When we talk about Austrian cosmopolitism then and now, if now is the reality as described by Andreas, let us go a little bit into the past. What is your first thought when Austrian cosmopolitism is mentioned? And I'm sure that Andreas will very soon remind me that there is Austria and there is Vienna. That is also very important. But speaking of that openness, diversity, what is your first impression?
Thank you, Ljubica. Thank you, Vladimir, for this invitation, and great to be with Andreas sharing this screen today. If you allow me, Ljubica, I'll just say one word on your cosmopolitism question. The thought that comes to mind, agreeing with everything that Andreas said. I'm reminded of Immanuel Kant, who was a great cosmopolitan but never left Königsberg or Kaliningrad today and went for his walk in the afternoon. So it doesn't necessarily mean an impediment, an obstacle to be cosmopolitan and feel if there is no freedom of movement. Indeed, we live in a different age. We have all used to traveling enormously. So it is a very difficult time not to be able to interact and encounter people. On cosmopolitanism in Austria and in Vienna, indeed, one thing for our listeners and viewers who might not be aware of it, the Serbian community is the biggest foreign community in Vienna. 100,000 Serbs. We are ahead of the Turks, who are 76,000 in Vienna, and ahead of the Germans, who are 60,000. So again, it shows what Vienna is in terms of diversity, of inclusion. In fact, 40% of the citizens of Vienna are foreign born. whether they carry Austrian passports or don't have them, which is enormous. Simply, one does not realize until one sees those figures. Directly to your question, I mean, Vienna is really seen as a cultural capital in historical sense of the word. So many things occurred here in music, in literature, in philosophy, in psychoanalysis, you know, Wittgenstein, Freud, literature, Stefan Zweig, Alban Berg, Schoenberg, the new musicality. Simply every corner of Vienna has some sort of plaque reminding you all the people who lived here, who were born here. And of course, that is a bit like, you know, walking through Rome. You're sort of walking through history, you're walking through archaeological layers of European and, dare I say, world culture. And that is, I would say, one of the most strongest feeling for someone who was not born here, who has come here to live for a certain time.
Mm-hmm. Andreas, when we speak about then and now, what would be the then in terms of this openness of the country? What would be the golden age of Austrian cosmopolitism? Is it the time of empire? Is it the time of the republic?
Yeah, you know, golden age is always a question of who you are and unfortunately what you have. So I'm pretty sure that Vienna is a perfect city for the tourist. If you come here as a laborer, it's quite a different story. Yeah? And since we talked about cosmopolitism from the beginning onwards, I want to add a little thing to what colleague Vejvodu said. We are the city hosting quite a lot of Serbian intellectuals, and maybe the fact that Vukaradžić lived here for quite a while is well known. We had Milo Dor, who was actually only 2 streets away from where I am living. He lived. And there's also Branko Radičević, the famous poet from the 19th century. He lived in the Schlösselgasse. And not a Serb, but a Yugoslav, so to speak, Ivan Cankar. He lived in Ottakring. And he is the reason where I want to continue with the answer to your question, because he wrote a very famous book, Maria Pomožnice, I think it is in Slovenian at least, Das Haus der Barmherzigkeit, where he writes about the famous redoutes and the shining uniforms of the smashy lieutenants and the beautiful comtesses and all that. And then he writes, but only 1.5 kilometers away from all that, misery begins. And I think when you have a look on Imperial Vienna, for instance, it was really a perfect inner city, but horrible suburbs. And they reminded you until the First World War to some third world ghettos, yeah, the favelas or something like that. And it was then the First Republic, especially the so-called Red Vienna, who made an enormous building program for housing and development, so that a lot more people than before that could live a proper living. So coming finally back to the original question, I would say, as a rich tourist, Vienna is a paradise, and I dream about a world where everyone coming to Vienna could feel like a rich tourist. Then it would be perfect.
Ivan, how do you feel in Vienna? It's been 4 years now.
Yes, indeed, and I'd like to continue where Andreas has gone. I think it's very important that we are aware of these differences that exist in a city. Obviously, personal experience is very good. You know, as one says, Vienna functions like a Swiss cuckoo clock. Everything runs on time. The trams the health service is above par compared to other countries, in spite of the pandemic problems that exist everywhere. And there's a sense of solidity. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire, wherever they occupied lands, built roads, schools, post offices, and sort of that you feel that here in the center of the former empire. But then, of course, as Andrea rightly points out, there's the dark side of the moon. And whether it's the Industrial Revolution during the empire, Brno today in the Czech Republic was what was called the Manchester of Central and Eastern Europe, with all these factories, with workers, working terrible hours. And I'd like to underline, I think, for those who are not aware of what is called Red Vienna, of this incredible, inspiring architectural, social, equitable project of building housing for workers. There's the famous Karl Marx Hof, which is a more than a kilometer-long building, but it's not only apartments. They built kindergartens, laundry rooms, playing fields within these, and you walk around Vienna, and it's beautifully written on each of these buildings, built through a special tax that was installed, taking, if you want, Robin Hood money from the rich to put into social housing projects, and these are still visited as one of the high cultural sites of Vienna. There are tours that take people. I may add on a personal note that my father, who went to study architecture in Prague in the 1930s, was inspired by Red Vienna, by social housing, and that's how he became a left-leaning young man and became a communist to fight anti-fascism, and eventually went to fight in the Spanish Civil War against fascism. So Vienna is this incredible mix, and I think that's what makes it very interesting between this rich cultural, cosmopolitan city. And let me just add, because I'm sure that you know, but our Belgrade-born Bogdan Roscic is the head of the Vienna Opera. Quite incredible and a great sort of pride to have someone like that here. And on the other side, this was a country who in the previous elections voted more than 25% for the far-right party, which I think is quite a unique political fact in a European country.
Mm-hmm. So what happens now? If we just got these nice bits from history, but let us come back to the year 2020. In that beautiful Vienna that is globally recognized as one of the cities where people live the best, where it is, as Ivan reminded us yesterday when we discussed about tonight's conversation, it is number one or very, very close to the top cities when people say evaluate the quality of life. And in such a beautiful place that is definitely recognized by the Western Balkan citizens of Western Balkan countries, a terrorist attack happens. Andreas, you would say it is not the first one, but how important, how stressful was it for you, citizens of Vienna, the city that is open, that does not suffer from claustrophobia? Does such an attack, of course, leave marks? But what did it change?
Yeah, quite frankly, for me, this terrorist attack was, how shall I put it, really weird, because I was sitting at home watching TV. I don't remember what it was, but it was a film. And suddenly I got a WhatsApp news from Czechoslovakia, where I was asked, "Are you all right?" And I thought, oh, how thoughtful that this person who's a friend of mine asks me if I'm okay. But I didn't connect it with the thing because of the attack. I didn't know anything by that. And only when I received also messages, no joke, from Munich and Los Angeles, also asking me if I'm okay, I started to switch on our news channel to find out what happened. So I was luckily perfectly safe. But of course, for the generation that faces that the first time, so the youngsters, the teenagers, those who are out in the coffee houses and in the bars at that time, of course it was a great shock, because I, as an old man, can recall terrorist attacks from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but we had really total peace for the last 20 years over here. So for people born, let's say, after 1995, it was a great shock. And luckily, it came, my English, luckily it was only one person, so it was a loner, so there was no bigger network or something. And we discussed it in our society quite openly, and I'm happy that no one finally jumped to general conclusions about threat coming from Islamic groups or whatever, because our, let's say, integration policy is very volatile. Ivan already mentioned that we have 25% voters of far-right groups, and they, of course, would love to see the society turning even more against other religious groups. And so you're absolutely right mentioning that event as a critical event, but I think so far we dealt with it sensibly, and I hope it won't happen again, so that the discussion is coming to an end on this level.
Even unfortunately, the situation and the investigation after that led to put Western Balkans again in the headlines, because the shooter, the terrorist, born in Austria, has the Balkan background. His family is from northern Macedonia. They are Albanians. You traveled a lot. You lived in different capitals, and you know about this issue that we have with the image and representation. As Andrea said, the story hasn't developed to an enormous proportions when it comes to Western Balkans and the terrorist attacks. But how was it? And how is it there today, being somebody coming from Serbia to work and live in Vienna?
Well, the simple and short answer to that question is one feels very well in Vienna. People are well integrated. If one speaks very generally, of course, there are particular problems. I was showing you yesterday that there's an English-speaking magazine called Metropole, which gave a special added edition on the various communities, and this one is devoted to Serbs living in Vienna. And you have stories about, nurses, policemen, doctors, Uber drivers who are all from this country, and they learn the language very quickly. And if you were to add Bosnians, Montenegrins, North Macedonians, and other former Yugoslavs to this, the group would be much bigger. Close to whatever, I don't know what the number would be. And these people starting these last generations, not to go back to Vuk Karadzic's time that Andreas rightfully mentioned, or even to the end of the 18th century, when people started coming. There have been waves, the Gastarbeiter wave, the migration wave with the wars. They have come here and settled down, and as I said, integrate pretty quickly. And in that sense, the terrorist attack was a shock. And nobody quite knew what was happening. There was word that there were many of them, that there were many more wounded. In fact, it turned out, as Andrea said, to be one lone wolf terrorist from Northern Macedonia of Albanian origin. And I would say that things have calmed down very quickly. The police were efficient in doing the work. The special forces that night neutralized and killed the terrorist. There are memorial places in around 5, 6. There's more the reflection, question: how do we go about preventing future events?
Mm-hmm. One of the messages that was released from the top of Austrian state was that we will not allow terrorists to divide our society. Now, I've been reading articles post-attack articles where people are saying, yes, we will close ranks in the fight against terrorism, but we will not encourage any kind of xenophobia or nationalism among us. Do you think that is the prevailing sentiment among Andreas, among people of Austria, people of Vienna, or are those who write about the increasing unhappiness with the number of newcomers are also right when describing the situation?
Personally, I would say the problem is that our society, especially in Vienna, is in fact divided. We always talk about integration, and we have quite a lot of examples where integration really worked. But that does us not allow to come to the conclusion that integration worked all the time and everywhere. We have some kind of parallel society, and it's among those people who feel neglected by the Austrian society, where Islamists and other extremists can find their victims to manipulate. That is a fact we see all the time. And I think our Austrian society and our politicians should send out more signs of respect towards the other communities. For instance, I personally don't understand. We have in Vienna 300,000 Turks, and we have nearly 200,000 Serbs, but we have no Serbian in school, we have no Turkish in school as a subject, but we learn French. I mean, I have absolutely nothing against the French, but if you would learn in primary school at least a bit of Turkish and Serbian, communication between the groups would work way better than it works now. Because you have the Austrians speaking German, you have the Turks speaking Turkish, and you have the Serbs speaking Serbian. And I think for the sake of the society, it would better to mingle it more. And to give all the groups the feeling that they are really integrated, not only by political declaration, but in everyday life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Even the Serbs and the people coming from other ex-Yugoslav republics love Vienna. They use the benefits and the opportunities to go there after the Second World War, to find jobs, to settle there, to find better life for themselves and for their families. Generations of young people use the opportunities to go to Austrian universities and to pay not pay very much for that. That is one set of impressions about Austrian cosmopolitism. On the other hand, 2 weeks ago, I think there was another challenging moment when, after last summer's statements about the people from Balkans who imported coronavirus to Austria, now there is this new measure. Andreas is smiling. There is this new measure introduced by Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and his government, that there will be a special set of restrictive measures for Christmas holidays for the citizens of Austria who would be traveling to Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, or northern Macedonia. How do you feel about that? Is that something that is that changes a little bit that image of Western Balkan nations being well accepted in Vienna and in Austria?
You're absolutely right to mention that. In fact, I would add even worse was that the Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, in a press conference that 2 weeks ago, directly accused the people from Southeastern Europe and Turkey to be the reason for the spike in infections. He came under huge attack and he retracted his statement several hours later and said that that was not the reason for the spike. All of our countries, we see that the numbers are just skyrocketing. We see the lockdown in Germany, in Britain, in France, in Serbia, to varying degrees. I'm staying here with my wife in Vienna for the holidays. We were supposed to travel to Belgrade these days, as we do every year. On the one hand, authorities here are saying don't travel. From Belgrade, they're saying don't come because of this. And so, better stay put, stay safe, and stay home. Yes, I think that these measures are, in one sense, have the dimension that you mentioned. There's a sense of putting the blame or on one side, but I wouldn't say it's a full kind of throttle accusation of this. It's just, I would say, desperate moves by a government that doesn't know what to do in terms of, curtailing the number of people who are ill and who are dying. You were absolutely right. I think it's important to underscore once again there's no other word, the generosity of the Austrian state funding system, that students from all of former Yugoslavia could come and study for free. I know a number of these students, a number of young artists who have made their careers here. And that's been incredible when you think the amount of money you have to pay in the United States or even in Great Britain. This is very social democratic in the deepest sense of the word. In fact, one must say, for the benefit of those who don't know the niceties of Austria, that Vienna has had a social democratic government for many, many years, not only in the 20s when Red Vienna started, etc., but even today. Now it's a coalition between the Liberals and the Social Democrats. Before it was with the Greens, and a lot of progressive, I would say, city-urban projects are thanks to this government, and in part to the way that social issues are being handled.
Andreas, you wanted, I feel that you wanted to comment on this import of a virus, about the virus traveling by car. That's also a description used by the Chancellor. As a journalist, I must say that I really admire how the press covered the issue, and how the intellectuals and cultural elites responded and stood against Chancellor, who is quite popular, I would say, and how my colleague journalist told him in an interview on TV that he was simply not speaking the truth when accusing the Balkan for this new spike in COVID pandemic. So how did you see that finding the culprit among people who travel either for fun or just to visit their mothers, fathers, grandparents?
Yeah, personally, I have a big problem with our chancellor at the moment because I see him. He is 34 years of age, so I see him highly unexperienced, and honestly, it puzzles me a bit that he first had a coalition with the Social Democrats, which he blew up. Then he had a coalition with the far right, which he blew up. And a lot of people are discussing if he would blow up also the coalition with the Greens soon. So, yeah. And he said a lot of stupid things within the last 9 months. I remember quite well when he said in the beginning of the pandemic situation that every one of us will have a dead person in the family soon. Yeah? Fortunately, that didn't happen. So I doubt if he is the right person to handle the problem. On the other hand, in his excuse, I have to say, the other countries are not doing really way better. So
no.
maybe he is only partly to blame. But for me, very important is that this current situation must be solved with democratic means. By no way we are allowed to use dictatorial or authoritarian methods to solve it, because I personally don't believe that it would be a solution. Yeah? And within this, what I'm saying, I also say simplifications do not help in any way. So don't throw with the finger on someone and say he is to blame, but use your time and find a solution. I mean a proper solution.
I personally envy Mr. Kurz on his 34 years, only 34 years. I would agree to change places with him. But I think the very fact that he was well, either forcefully or willingly, he did say eventually that the statement was too harsh. Speaking about Western Balkans, and then he wanted even, I think, to reiterate, to remind us all that he is a great friend of Western Balkans, and that he is the one who pushes for the EU integrations and towards the Western Balkan countries. Do you think that policy is genuine? That he really, this is what he said is really what he believes in?
Yeah, I believe that that's absolutely true. In fact, all of the neighboring countries of former Yugoslavia are very pro enlargement, whether it's Greece in the south, now Bulgaria is having a problem with North Macedonia, which I frankly think is outrageous. Hungary is very pro-enlargement. Austria has been systematically pro-enlargement. The famous saying of Metternich that the Balkans begin in the Rennweg, which is a street here in central Vienna. So you can look at it both ways, but Austria being a full EU member that has a lot of investments in our whole region is interested in that, and also for reasons of geopolitical security, to have beyond Slovenia and Croatia that are already members, also Serbia, which is the biggest part of former Yugoslavia, to be locked in. So I think that is a genuine policy. There has been this strange issue of there's, I would say, some loose punditry or talk that serves support the far right. And former leader of the far right party, Strache, because he was seen as pro-Serb. That party imploded after what was called the Ibiza scandal. Some of you know about it, no need to go into details, but it is important to say that that party imploded at the last elections. I mean, they got much less votes than the 26% that they got in the previous election. I don't know the opinion polls strictly on how Serbs vote, but I think they tend to vote for the ÖVP, for the Chancellor's party, and some clearly for the far right. But I think it's there's a sense that Austria is supportive of the country. If I may add, Ljubica, one thing that I think we shouldn't miss is that Austria is seen as a bridge between the East and the West. Historically, not only because of the Habsburg Empire, because of where it is geographically placed, because of the fact that they were with the Hungarians in that empire. But today, Austria and Vienna have really pushed over the last 4 decades to become an international center. That is why this is the place where you have the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. Its central office is here in Vienna at the Hofburg Palace. You have a lot of UN agencies in the famous UN quarter of Vienna. You have the Organization of Petrol Exporting Countries that was famous in the 70s when there was the huge oil crisis. So there's a purposeful policy to attract internationals to come to Vienna because it's good for the city. You know, they pay rent, they buy food, and so it raises the standard of living here. And that is an important dimension of, if that's what we're calling it, cosmopolitan Vienna.
Andreas, I read an article.
May I just a footnote to that?
Sure.
Yeah, Ivana is perfectly right. But I want to mention all that was created in our beautiful 70s. We have to mention Bruno Kreisky at that point, because I think he was not only a prime minister, a chancellor, where a lot of progressive reforms were set out. He was really genuinely our last great cosmopolitan person. Because he was born into a rich Jewish family, but he became a social democrat. And I have to quote, since I wrote a biography on him, I have to quote the German Franz Josef Strauss, who once said that Bruno Kreisky is too big for Austria. And yeah, I'm happy that we had these times, and I hope that this cosmopolitical tradition he brought to Vienna can be forthwritten also by upcoming generations.
Andreas, there was an article in Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, I think, after this terrorist attack, and after this, the article follows the investigation, the background of the shooter. And there is a line there, obviously, that the author of the article knows about the links between Austria and the Balkans. And he wrote, of course, Vienna is the capital of the Western Balkans. Now, when you read a line like that, does that, how does that make you feel? Or do you say, oh no, we really, that's something that could really pass, I mean, that's the privilege that we can live without. Or would you say, you personally and your friends would say, well, that's great that somebody who the people who used to be part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, in spite of everything, see my hometown as some sort of capital?
I'm afraid I'm not really representative for this question, because I'm personally am a great friend of the Balkans, and as famous Serbian writer Dragan Velikić can say as a witness, before the COVID crisis, I was on the Balkans every year at least twice, most of the time even 3 times or 4 times. So for me, it's a compliment. But to the topic of cosmopolitism, we can here add something. Yeah? When we talk about the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, it was not only the Balkans and what is Austria and Hungary today. It was also Czechoslovakia, so Czech Republic and Slovakia. It was vast parts of modern Poland, and it was quite a lot of today's Ukraine. Yeah? And the before mentioned Bruno Kreisky wrote in his memoirs how deep the impact was on the Austrian population, so the Austrians of this Austria, what we have today, how deep the impact was of the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, because before that, the Viennese person was on equal terms with Prague, Zagreb, Budapest, Krakow, yeah? And all out of a sudden, he was equal with Hinterkreuzstetten and St. Egid am Wechsel. Yeah? So Bruno Kreisky wrote this beautiful sentence: we were the biggest country next to Russia, the second biggest country in Europe, and then all was left was Vienna and a few mountains. So I think that our cosmopolitan tradition had really a severe blow back then, and we only learned due to the 70s and our special role as a neutral country to find to a new kind of cosmopolitism, which worked out well for quite a while, and which hopefully works out well as well in the future.
Mm-hmm. Getting ready to wrap up this interesting discussion, Ivan, I would like you to try to imagine how would the new normal look like. We are very soon to say goodbye to 2020, and I'm sure that the most of us would like to forget about it. Speaking about Austrian cosmopolitism then and now, and let us expand the topic a little bit. How will it be? How will it look like in this post-COVID COVID era? And who do you think should be the front runner in again, artists, NGOs, intellectuals, or heaven forbid, politicians?
Well, thank you. I think we need to add one of the dimensions to the cosmopolitanism of Austria, in fact, of Vienna, that we haven't underscored. It was mentioned by Andreas. Bruno Kreisky absolutely rightly, and there's a lovely center which does panels like Koktel does on a number of issues, and as Andreas said, Kreisky was of Jewish origin, and that's the Jewish dimension of Austrian cosmopolitanism, which is absolutely key to that then cosmopolitanism. There were about 180,000 Jews living in Vienna in the 1920s and 80s, and Stefan Zweig wrote about it in his famous memoir, The World of Yesterday, subtitled Memoir of a European. And 120,000 were happy to flee before the Anschluss of Hitler. About 65,000 perished in terrible death in the camps and here in Austria. And so there is this and I'll quote very briefly one sentence, Zweig, who says, the Jewish bourgeoisie played an immeasurable role in Viennese culture, both by their cooperation and their promotion of that culture. In no other city was it easier to be a European. And I think that we see traces of that everywhere in the city. I mentioned yesterday when we talked, the Stolpersteine, the stumbling stones in front of many houses. There are these messing little plaques of the names of the families that lived in my street. There are several you know, when they were born and in which camp, Auschwitz or Dachau, they perished. It is not for no reason that Austria was occupied for 10 years, from 1945 till 1955, by the Soviets, the Americans, the British, and the French, and then it became the Republic in 1955. There are many traces of that. There's a Jewish population now of around 8,000, and a friend and colleague, Edward Serota, has a center here that studies that. They just recently published a Vienna Jewish source book, which is very interesting with a lot of these stories. So that's something I want to leave with you about the impressions of Vienna. You know, you ask yourself what happened to this cosmopolitan city, that it went down a very dark, deep hole for, you know, at least 7 years of Nazism. A bit like the question we asked ourselves about Germany. What happened to Germany when Hitler came to power? This very cultured nation suddenly goes completely to the dark side. And of course, Vienna has recovered. And I come to your question now: what is the future and the now of that? As we said, Bruno Kreisky laid the foundations of an international city, not only through these political organizations, but for being one of the most welcoming cities for artists around the world. I mean, we think of opera and music. First of all, as I said, it's a Belgrade-born person who is head of one of the finest cultural institutions, the Vienna Opera House, but also so many others. And I think that cultivation, the institute which I work in, the Institute for Human Sciences, is one of those places where we bring people from Ukraine, from Russia, from Central and Eastern Europe to meet West European intellectuals. And I think that a place of encounter, that place in between that Vienna is really the future. There's a lot to be done. There are these social issues that we mentioned. You know, Vienna is not the perfect place. It does rank number one in quality of life nearly every year, and one can feel it. Undoubtedly, life is relatively much better than in many other cities, and the pollution is definitely lesser here in Vienna than in others.
Andreas, our host is a writer, Vlada Arsenijević, and our friends from Koktel. So let us finish with a couple of thoughts from you as a writer. Does this incredible year that we are just almost saying goodbye to, these extraordinary situations, COVID pandemic, terrorist attacks, migration, immigration crisis, is that an inspiration for a new book?
Yeah.
I mean, this is as an artist, you almost don't have to be imaginative. You can just write the diary of the everyday's life and make a great great novel. Or
I'm afraid if you would write a non-fiction book simply about the facts that happened, everyone would think it is fiction. Okay? Only we that we live through it know that it's true, but I think our grandchildren won't believe that happened. And in general, I can say I'm not only a writer, I'm also an historian. Nearly all my novels deal with either history itself or with all the implications in today's society that are rooted in history. So if I may add here, my most famous character is David Bronstein, a Jewish Viennese person. And I wrote several books about him, starting in the 1930s and going back until the monarchy. So I wrote it chronological, because I think to come to the roots of a problem, you have to dig deeper and deeper to find the real reason for the problem. And that means for me, we will not only have to write about what happened in 2020, we will also have to think about why it happened, to come to a point where we can see how we can prevent it the next time. Because I don't want to paint the devil on the wall, but there may be a COVID-20 or a COVID-21, and we should by then be prepared betterly.
Andreas, you also worked at the parliament as a civil servant.
Yeah.
Right. The parliament is to discuss in the following weeks and months about the set of anti-terrorist laws. Would that be a challenge for I mean, that obvious necessity to fight terrorism, to protect innocent people from these lunatics? But I guess there is always a thin line. Where does the war on terror ends, and where does the intrusion and the problems for cosmopolitism, for freedom of expression, freedom of spirit, a good atmosphere for artists, for debate, political, cultural, economic start. So how do you see this would unfold?
I believe that we don't need these new laws anyway, because all the problems we are facing with terrorist attacks, with people trying to put hatred between groups, all that is perfectly already regulated in our laws. So from the basic law we have now, we can cope with every criminal on that field. What I personally miss is, as we mentioned half an hour ago, more steps of real integration. It is vital that people from a Arabic background, a Turkish background, a Balkan background, can feel accepted with their whole culture and history they are bringing in. I personally always found it very, very charming and tempting how the Americans dealt with that. Because there you can be proud to be an Irish American. You can be proud to be an Italo-American. You can be proud not only of your new nation, but also of the nation you derive from, Swedish American, whatever. And that I lack a little in Austrian society, to give those people the rightful feeling that it is an advantage to have not only the culture of Austria, but also a second culture or a third culture. And that enriches us and leads us back to Bruno Kreisky and the Jews and the cosmopolitism.
Thank you very much. Ivan, if you want to add something, we have half a minute because we are just at the very end. If there is something that you would like to add, this is the moment.
I just want to say that I fully agree with what Andreas just said, and to repeat his words from a few minutes ago. You know, I think what we are in the business of, whether we're writers or researchers, is to see how we can avoid going down that deep dark hole that we went down in the 20s and 30s with fascism and Nazism, and now with terrorism. There are lessons to be learned. Times are completely different. 2021 is not 1933. We do have populists, we do have authoritarian trends, but I think it's always about struggling for greater spaces of freedom. And I would say with Andreas, whatever the country is, I think the laws that we have are quite sufficient. It's about really implementing them, but then going down deeper into issues of education, civic education in particular, that would help us find ways in which we can impede some of these social developments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ivana Vejvodu. Thank you, Andreasa Pitlera. It was really a pleasure listening to you too. And I hope that our next meeting will be also with the help and in organization of Koktel, but perhaps in Belgrade. Or even in Vienna. It would be great, really, to continue this debate, but this time in person. Have a nice evening, and all the best.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ljubica, we aren't doing a questions and answers. This is the end.
I'm afraid our time is up, and that is why I'm suggesting maybe we should think about continuing this interesting conversation. Hvala svima koji su nas gledali i slušali. Thank you to all of you who followed us. This would be the end. Have a great evening, and thank you. Many thanks to Vlada Arsenijević and our friends from Koktel for organizing this enjoyable evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.